His parents kicked him out at 13, but when he returns after 10 years, Nathan clutched the bundle of clothes to his chest as tears streamed down his 13-year-old face. Behind him, his parents Robert and Karen stood motionless in the doorway, arms crossed, their expressions hard as stone. "Get out, Nathan," Robert shouted, his voice cutting through the morning air. "You've disappointed us for the last time. We don't want you here anymore." The boy turned around one last time, hoping to see even a hint of regret on his mother's face. Karen looked away, the tears she was trying to hide glistening in the corners of her eyes. But her stance remained, firm, arms crossed, determined not to give in. "Mom, please," Nathan begged, his voice choked. "I swear I didn't do anything wrong. You have to believe me." "Enough!" Robert slammed his fist against the wall. "Liar! We saw you with our own eyes. How can you deny what you did to Frank's workshop?" Nathan shook his head desperately. The night before, the neighbor's auto shop had been vandalized, tires slashed, paint splattered on the walls, tools broken, and several people swore they'd seen Nathan and his friends running from the scene around 10 at night. The problem was, Nathan had been home at that time, studying for a test. But his parents didn't believe him. "I was here. You know I was," he cried, desperation rising in his voice. "Stop lying," Karen finally snapped. "Margaret saw you running. Frank himself said he recognized your voice. How can you stand there and lie to our faces?" Nathan felt his world crumbling around him. For 13 years, he'd been a model son. Good grades, never in trouble, always helping around the house without complaint. But now, because of an accusation he knew was false, he was being thrown out like a criminal. "You don't trust me," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "After everything, you'd rather believe the neighbors than your own son." Robert stepped closer, his face red with anger. "Trust is earned, kid, and you broke ours. Take your things and get out. We don't want to see your face anymore." The pain in Nathan's chest was physical. It felt like a giant hand was squeezing his heart. He looked at the house he'd grown up in, the yard where he'd played as a child, the window of the bedroom where he'd slept for 13 years. All of it was being ripped away in a matter of minutes. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "That's not our problem anymore," Karen replied, avoiding his gaze. "You should have thought about that before destroying Frank's shop." Nathan picked up the small backpack with a few clothes his mother had tossed onto the sidewalk. Inside were just 3 shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, some underwear, and a jacket. It was all he owned in the world at that moment. "One day you'll find out the truth," he said, struggling to his feet. "And when that happens, I hope you can live with what you did to me today." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. Robert and Karen stood in silence watching their son walk down the street. When Nathan turned the corner and disappeared from view, Karen collapsed into tears, but Robert grabbed her arm. "No," he said firmly. "We did the right thing. Let him learn the consequences of his actions." But as they closed the door, both felt a strange emptiness settling in their hearts. The house seemed bigger and quieter than ever. Nathan wandered the streets of Hopeville, the neighborhood where he'd been born and raised, with no idea where to go. The sun was rising, and soon people would start leaving for work. He didn't want anyone to see him in that state. The shame was almost as painful as his parents' rejection. He thought of his grandmother Grace, his mother's sister, who lived across town. She had always been kind to him, but Nathan knew she and Karen had fought years ago over an inheritance and barely spoke. Still, she was his only option. The walk to Grace's house took nearly 2 hours. Nathan had to take 2 buses, spending the little money he had in his pocket. When he finally reached his grandmother's door, he was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Grace, a 65-year-old woman with graying hair and gentle eyes, opened the door and was startled to see her grandson standing there with a backpack and eyes red from crying. "Nathan, what are you doing here, sweetheart? Shouldn't you be in school, Grandma?" he managed to say before breaking down in tears again. "They kicked me out, said I'm not their son anymore, Grace immediately opened her arms and pulled him into a tight hug. She didn't ask questions then, just led him inside and let him cry as much as he needed. After calming Nathan down and giving him something to eat, Grace finally heard the whole story. She had known her grandson since he was little and knew he wasn't capable of what they were accusing him of. But she also knew Robert's stubborn nature and understood it would be hard to change his mind. "You can stay here with me as long as you need," she said, stroking the boy's hair. "But we have to fix this. I'll call your mother and—" "No," Nathan interrupted. "They made it clear they don't want to see me. I won't beg to go back." "But honey, you're only 13. You can't just—" "You can't. I can take care of myself," Nathan said, a new determination shining in his eyes. "If they don't trust me, then they don't deserve a son." Grace saw in that moment that something had changed in her grandson. The sweet, trusting boy had been replaced by a wounded, wary teenager. His parents' rejection had built a wall around Nathan's heart that would be hard to break. In the first few days at his grandmother's house, Nathan barely left his room. Grace tried to cheer him up, cooking his favorite meals, buying treats, but nothing seemed to pull him out of the deep depression he'd sunk into. The most painful moments were when he woke up in the morning and for a few seconds forgot where he was. He'd even call for his mother before remembering he wasn't home anymore. In those moments, Grace would hear muffled sobs from his room and feel her heart break. A week after the expulsion, Grace got a call from Karen. Her daughter's voice was shaky, heavy with guilt and longing. "Mom, is Nathan there with you?" "Yes, and he's devastated, Karen. How could you do this to him?" He wrecked. "Frank's workshop. We have witnesses, Mom. We couldn't just let it go." "Witnesses can be wrong," Grace interrupted, "but a mother knows her son. Do you really believe Nathan would do something like that?" There was a long silence on the other end. Grace could hear her daughter's heavy breathing, knew she was wrestling with her own doubts. "Robert said if I go get Nathan, he'll leave. The house," Karen finally confessed. "He's convinced our son is a delinquent. And I don't know what to believe anymore." "So you chose your husband over your son?" Grace asked, shocked. "It's not that. It's complicated, Mom. Robert is so hurt. He said if Nathan comes back, our family will fall apart." "And you don't think it already has?" Grace countered. "Karen, your son is here with me, but he's changed. He's not the happy boy you knew anymore. You broke something inside him." After the call, Grace went to the room where Nathan pretended to sleep. She knew he had heard the whole conversation. She sat on the edge of the bed and stroked his back. "Did she call to ask about me?" Nathan asked, his voice muffled by the pillow. "She did. She misses you." "But not enough to defend me," he said, turning to face his grandmother. "She chose to stay with him instead of fighting for me." "Sometimes people make the wrong choices when they're scared, Nathan. That doesn't mean they don't love you. Love that doesn't fight for you is worthless," the boy replied, a bitterness beyond his years coloring his words. Grace realized in that moment that the wound caused by his parents was turning into something deeper and more dangerous: resentment. And she knew that if she didn't do something soon, that resentment could poison her grandson's heart forever. In the weeks that followed, Grace tried to enroll Nathan in a school near her home, but ran into bureaucratic hurdles. Since she wasn't his legal guardian, she needed documents that were with his parents. When she called Karen to ask for the papers, Robert answered the phone. "If he's not in our house anymore, then he's not our problem," Robert said coldly. "He can figure it out himself." "Robert, for God's sake, he needs to go to school. Should have thought of that before he did what he did. We're not signing anything. He made his choice." Nathan, who had overheard the conversation, felt a fresh wave of anger and rejection. Not only had he been kicked out of his home, but now his parents were actively sabotaging his future. The wound in his heart deepened even further. "I don't need school," he told Grace. "I'll get a job and support myself." "You're 13, Nathan. You can't work legally." "Then I'll do odd jobs. Anything's better than depending on people who don't want me." And so, Nathan began his adulthood prematurely. Grace used her connections in the neighborhood to find small jobs for her grandson. He started by helping at a bakery early in the morning, delivering bread to houses. In the afternoons, he swept the yard of a wood shop. On weekends, he worked at a street market, carrying bags for customers. The money he earned was little, but Nathan made sure to give some to his grandmother and save the rest. He was determined to prove to himself that he didn't need his parents for anything. As the months passed, the 13-year-old boy began to change. The hard work built muscle on his thin frame. The early responsibility matured his mind. But what changed most was his heart. The sweet, trusting boy had vanished completely, replaced by a hardened, wary teenager. Grace watched these changes with growing concern. She loved her grandson and admired his determination, but she felt he was losing something essential, the ability to trust and love. Every time she tried to talk about his parents, Nathan changed the subject or simply walked out of the house. A year after the expulsion, Grace received another call from Karen. This time, her daughter was crying. "Mom, we found out who really vandalized Frank's workshop," she said between sobs. "It was Ethan, that boy who lives on the back street. He confessed to his mother yesterday." Grace felt a mix of relief and anger. "And what are you going to do now?" she asked. "We want Nathan back, Robert." "Robert's eaten up with guilt. He wants to apologize and bring our son home." "And you think it'll be that simple?" Grace asked, watching as Nathan walked in, dirty and tired from work. "You shattered his heart, Karen. He's not the same boy anymore. Please, Mum, tell him we're sorry, that we want our family back." Grace promised to talk to Nathan, but when she shared the news with her grandson, his reaction was nothing like she expected. Instead of happiness or relief, Nathan showed only indifference. "Too late," he said, continuing to eat his dinner. "Now they know I was right. But where were they when I needed them?" "They're sorry, Nathan. They want you back." "I don't want to go back," he replied firmly. "I have a life here. I work, I earn my own money. I don't depend on anyone. Why would I want to return to a house where they didn't trust me?" "Because they're your parents, and they love you." "If they loved me, they would have believed me when I needed them most." Nathan got up from the table and went to his room. "This conversation is over, Grandma." Grace was left alone in the kitchen, her heart heavy. She knew her grandson had every right to be hurt, but she also knew that hurt was turning into something destructive. Nathan was building walls around his heart, and she feared she might never be able to break them down. Over the following weeks, Robert and Karen made several attempts to reach out to Nathan. They sent letters he refused to read. They gave gifts he returned. They even showed up at Grace's house, but Nathan slipped out the back door when he saw them coming. The situation became unbearable when Robert decided to go to the bakery where Nathan worked. It was early in the morning, and the boy was carrying boxes of bread when he saw his father approaching. For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence. Robert looked like he had aged years in just a few months. His face was thinner, his hair grayer, his eyes marked by sleepless nights. "Nathan," Robert said, his voice choked. "Son, I'm not your son," Nathan interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "You made that very clear a year ago." "I was wrong. We found out who really—" "I know, Grandma told me, but it doesn't change anything." Robert tried to step closer, but Nathan backed away. "It changes everything. You were innocent. We made a terrible mistake, and—" "You didn't make a mistake," Nathan said, his eyes burning with anger. "You made a choice. You chose to believe strangers over me. You chose to throw me away like I was trash, and now you want to take it back because you found out you were wrong? Please, son, let me explain." "I don't want your explanations," Nathan shouted, drawing the attention of others on the street. "I want you to leave and never come near me again. You're nothing to me now." Robert tried to say more, but Nathan walked into the bakery and asked the owner not to let his father inside. Robert stood on the sidewalk for nearly an hour, hoping his son would change his mind. But Nathan didn't come out until he was sure his father had left. That night, Grace found Nathan crying in his room for the first time in months. These weren't tears of sadness, but of anger and frustration. "He showed up at my job," Nathan said, "had the nerve to come there and talk to me like nothing happened. He just wants your forgiveness, my boy." "Well, he won't get it," Nathan wiped his tears. Angrily, "He taught me that family means nothing when things get hard. That the people who should protect you are the first to abandon you. I learned that lesson well." Grace's heart ached. Her grandson was repeating the words he'd heard from his own father the day he was thrown out. The wound was becoming a scar, but a scar that twisted his heart. Years passed and Nathan continued living with Grace. By 16, he was working full-time at a mechanic's shop. Ironically, the same profession as the man who had been wrongly accused of vandalism years before. Frank, the owner of the auto shop that had been vandalized, discovered the truth about the incident and learned Nathan's story. Overcome with guilt for contributing to the boy's expulsion, he offered him an apprenticeship. Nathan was smart and hard-working. He quickly learned every aspect of the business and became a skilled mechanic. Frank began to see him as the son he never had, and even offered to legally adopt him when Nathan turned 18. But the young man refused, saying he didn't need a father. During those years, Robert and Karen never completely gave up on trying to reconcile. They sent letters on birthdays that were returned unopened. They mailed Christmas gifts that Nathan donated to others. Occasionally, they showed up at Grace's house, but Nathan always found a way to avoid them. The most painful thing for Grace was seeing how her grandson had become a lonely person. By 21, Nathan was a handsome and successful man. He had saved enough money to buy his own home, a small townhouse in the same neighborhood where he lived with his grandmother. Frank had retired and left the shop to him, which had become one of the most respected auto shops in the area. But Nathan had no close friends. He didn't date seriously. He didn't trust anyone completely, except Grace. He had built a good life materially, but emotionally, he remained the wounded 13-year-old boy who had been kicked out of his home. "You can't live like this forever," Grace said one night as they ate dinner together. "You can't let this bitterness control your whole life." "I'm doing just fine, Grandma," Nathan replied. "I have my house, my job, my money. I don't need anything else." "Yes, you do. You need love, family, real friends." "Family?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "You taught me that family is who stands by you when you need them. The only ones who did that were you and Frank. That's enough for me." "And when I'm not here anymore?" Grace asked, her voice gentle but heavy with concern. Nathan stopped eating and looked at his grandmother. At 80, Grace was still strong and sharp, but he knew she wouldn't live forever. The thought of losing her terrified him because she was literally the only person in the world he trusted completely. "Don't say that," he murmured. "It's the truth, my boy. And when that day comes, you'll be completely alone if you don't learn to forgive and trust people again." "I'd rather be alone than betrayed again," Nathan replied. But his voice lacked the conviction it once had. Truthfully, loneliness was starting to weigh on Nathan. He worked all day at the shop, came home, ate dinner with Grace when she was available, watched TV and slept. On weekends, he sometimes went out for drinks with acquaintances, but he never formed deep connections. Over the years, several women had shown interest in him. Nathan was good-looking, had a stable career, and owned his home. But whenever someone tried to get close, he put up walls. He couldn't open up, couldn't trust enough to build a real relationship. At 22, Nathan met Jessica, a teacher who brought her car to the shop for repairs. She was different from the other women who had tried to approach him. She wasn't pushy, didn't ask personal questions. She just talked naturally while he worked on her car. Jessica came back a few times for minor fixes that could have been done anywhere. Nathan realized she was making excuses to see him, but for some reason, it didn't bother him. In fact, he began looking forward to her visits. Eventually, Jessica invited him out for coffee. Nathan almost refused out of instinct, but something about her put him at ease. Maybe it was the fact that she was a teacher and worked with children every day, which made her naturally kind and patient. Or perhaps it was simply because he was tired of being alone. The relationship developed slowly. Jessica respected Nathan's boundaries. She didn't ask about his family or push to know his personal life. They went out together, talked about work, movies, books, but Nathan carefully kept his emotional life locked away. After 6 months of dating, Jessica finally brought up the subject Nathan avoided most. "You never talk about your family," she said as they walked through the park. "I only know your grandmother. Where are your parents?" Nathan felt his muscles tense automatically. It was the question he'd feared since the beginning of their relationship. "I don't have parents," he replied flatly. "What do you mean you don't? Did they pass away?" They left my life when I was 13. Nathan stopped walking and turned to her. And before you ask, I don't want to talk about it, ever. Jessica saw the pain and anger in his eyes and understood she'd touched a deep wound. She nodded and changed the subject, but Nathan sensed something had shifted between them. He'd been needlessly harsh with her, and it bothered him. That night he called to apologize. I'm sorry for snapping at you today, he said. It's just complicated. You don't owe me an explanation, Jessica replied. We all have wounds we'd rather not reopen. I just want you to know I'm here if you ever want to talk. For the first time in years, Nathan felt the urge to open up to someone. He almost told Jessica the whole story that night, but something held him back. The fear of being judged, of being abandoned again, was stronger than his desire for closeness. Nathan and Jessica's relationship lasted 2 years. 2 good years, where Nathan experienced a happiness he hadn't felt since childhood. But there was always a barrier between them, a part of himself Jessica could never reach, and eventually it began to wear on their relationship. I love you, Nathan, Jessica said one night over dinner at her place. But I feel like I don't really know you. You won't let me all the way into your life. You know everything you need to know, Nathan replied, but even to himself his voice sounded defensive. No, I don't. I don't know what hurt you so badly that you still can't trust me after 2 years together. I don't know why you shut down every time someone tries to get close. Maybe because people always disappoint, Nathan murmured. Am I going to disappoint you too? Jessica asked, tears glistening in her eyes. Nathan looked at her and felt his chest tighten. Jessica was good, kind. She'd never given him any reason to distrust her. But even knowing that, he couldn't bring himself to open up completely. I don't know, he answered honestly. I hope not. But you're expecting me to, aren't you? Jessica realized. You're guarding yourself against a betrayal that might never happen. And in the process, you're sabotaging our happiness. Nathan had no reply because he knew she was right. He was so focused on protecting himself from future pain that he was causing pain in the present. A week later, Jessica ended the relationship. I love you, she said, crying, but I can't compete with ghosts from your past. I can't prove I'm trustworthy to someone who's decided not to trust anyone. Nathan watched Jessica walk out of his life and felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same pain he'd felt when he was thrown out of his home at 13. The crushing weight of abandonment, rejection, deep loneliness. But this time, a small part of him recognized that not all the blame was Jessica's. He had contributed to the end of the relationship by refusing to be vulnerable, to trust, to love completely. In the months that followed, Nathan sank even deeper into his loneliness. He worked longer hours at the shop, avoided any social contact, and returned to the solitary routine that had been his life before Jessica. Grace, now 82 years old, watched her grandson with growing concern. She knew he had broken up with Jessica, but Nathan refused to talk about it. You're turning into a bitter man, she said during one of the rare times she managed to get him to sit down for a serious talk. This isn't what I wanted for you. I'm fine, Grandma, Nathan lied. I don't need anyone. Everyone needs someone, my boy. And you're wasting your life over an old grudge. It's not just a grudge, Nathan snapped. It's a life lesson. I learned that people abandon you when things get tough. I learned that even parents aren't reliable. Why would I want to risk that again? Because that's no way to live, Grace replied firmly. That's existing, surviving, but it's not truly living. It's enough for me. No, it's not. And I know that because I've known you since you were little. You were always a child who needed love, affection, connection. This cold person you've become isn't the real you. Nathan stood up from the table, irritated. This cold person protects me, he said. Protects me from getting hurt again. And it also protects you from being happy, Grace countered. In the days that followed, Nathan thought a lot about his grandmother's words. Was he really happy? He had a good life materially, but emotionally. The last time he had felt truly happy was with Jessica, and even then he had always kept a part of himself guarded, protected. Then came news that would change everything. Frank, the man, who had become a father figure to him, had a heart attack and was hospitalized. Nathan rushed to the hospital and stayed by the man's side for days until he recovered. "You're like a son to me," Frank said when he was better. "I want you to know that." "You're like a father to me too," Nathan replied, surprising himself with his own honesty. "Then listen to me as if I were your father," Frank said, gripping Nathan's hand. "You're wasting your life. You're 25 and living like a grumpy old man. Where are the kids, the wife, the family you should be building?" "I don't want those things," Nathan lied. "Yes, you do. I saw how happy you were with that teacher. I saw how you lit up when she was around, and I saw how destroyed you were when she left. She's the one who broke up with me." "Because you wouldn't let her love you for real," Frank pointed out. "Son, I know your story. I know what your parents did to you, but you can't let that define the rest of your life." Nathan left the hospital with Frank's words echoing in his mind. For the first time in years, he began seriously questioning the choices he'd made. Was he really protecting himself, or was he just depriving himself of a full life? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Nathan had a dream about his childhood. He dreamed he was playing in his parents' backyard, that his mother called him for dinner, that his father helped him with his homework. He woke up with tears in his eyes, a deep longing tightening his chest. It had been 10 years since he'd been kicked out of the house, 10 years since he'd seen his parents. Did they still think about him? Did they still care? And more importantly, did he even want to know the answers to those questions? Over the following weeks, Nathan found himself driving through the streets of Hopeville, the neighborhood where he'd grown up. He always made up an excuse to pass by the old house, but never stopped. He'd just look from a distance, trying to see if he recognized anyone. During one of these drives, he ran into Margaret, the neighbor who had testified against him 10 years earlier. She was leaving the supermarket when she recognized him. "Nathan," she said, walking closer. "My goodness, how you've grown." Nathan thought about ignoring her and walking away, but something made him stop. "Mrs. Margaret," he greeted coldly. "I need to ask for your forgiveness," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "What I said about you vandalizing the workshop, I was wrong. It was dark. I couldn't see properly. When we found out it was Ethan, I felt so guilty." Nathan stared at her in silence. For years he had hated this woman for giving the testimony that got him kicked out of his home. But now, seeing her there, old and remorseful, he only felt a deep sadness. "The damage is already done," he said. "I know, but your parents, they suffered so much after you left. Your mother fell ill from crying so much. Your father started drinking. They regretted what they did terribly." "They regretted it?" Nathan felt a mix of satisfaction and pain. "Very much. They tried to find you many times, but you never wanted to talk to them. They still live in the same house, you know, and they still talk about you every day." Nathan was hit by a wave of conflicting emotions. Part of him was glad to know his parents had suffered the consequences of their actions, but another part, one he'd tried to bury for years, pitied them. "How are they?" he asked, almost against his will. "Older, sadder. Your father retired early because of stress-related health problems. Your mother, she was never the same after you left. I think a part of her died that day." Nathan's chest tightened. Even after everything, the thought of his parents' suffering still affected him. "They deserve it," he said, but his voice sounded less convincing than he'd intended. "Maybe," Margaret agreed, "but you also deserve a family. And they deserve a chance to apologize in person." After that encounter, Nathan felt even more unsettled. Margaret's words echoed in his mind, blending with those of Grace, Frank, and Jessica. They all said the same thing, that he was wasting his life over an old grudge. But how could he forgive something so deep? How could he trust people who had betrayed him when he needed them most? How could he open his heart to those who had thrown him away like trash? One evening, as he ate alone in his quiet house, Nathan made a decision. He would visit his parents. Not to forgive them or reconcile, but to say to their faces everything he'd held in his heart for 10 years. He'd make them understand the depth of the pain they'd caused, and then finally he'd be able to move on. At least, that's what he told himself. Deep down, part of him was desperately curious to know how his parents were, if they still thought of him, if they truly regretted what they'd done. He spent 3 days mentally preparing for the meeting. He rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd act. He wanted to seem strong, successful, indifferent. He wanted them to see he'd done just fine without them. But when he finally parked in front of the house where he'd grown up, Nathan's legs trembled. The house looked smaller than he remembered, more worn. The garden his mother had tended with such care was half abandoned. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint. He sat in the car for nearly 20 minutes, watching the house, gathering courage. More than once he thought about turning around and leaving, but something stronger than fear pushed him forward. When he finally stepped out of the car and walked to the front door, his heart pounded so loudly he was sure it could be heard from afar. He raised his hand to knock, hesitated, took a deep breath, and finally did. Footsteps approached from the other side of the door. Nathan heard Karen's voice asking who it was, and for a moment he thought about running, but it was too late. The door opened, and mother and son faced each other for the first time in 10 years. Karen looked like she had aged 20 years in 10. Her hair was almost entirely grey, her face lined with worry and sorrow. She was thinner, more fragile, a faded version of the energetic woman Nathan remembered. For a few seconds they stood, in silence, just staring. Nathan saw tears well up in his mother's eyes, saw her hands tremble as she brought one to her mouth, stifling a sob. "Nathan," she finally managed to whisper. You came back?" "I didn't come back," Nathan said, his voice colder than he intended. "I just came to talk." Karen nodded quickly, wiping her tears with her sleeve. Of course, come in please, Robert," she called into the house. "Robert, come here. Nathan, our son is here." Nathan hesitated before stepping inside. Entering that house again stirred him more than he expected. Everything was practically the same as he remembered, yet it all felt different. Smaller, quieter, sadder. Robert appeared in the living room and Nathan was shocked by the change in his father. The strong, authoritative man who had kicked him out had become a frail, stooped old man. His hair was grey, his face marked by age and suffering. He walked slowly, clearly struggling with his health. When he saw Nathan, Robert froze in the middle of the room, tears immediately filling his eyes. "My son," he murmured, taking a step toward Nathan. "I'm not your son," Nathan said automatically, but his voice lacked the firmness he wanted. Robert stopped, pain evident on his face. You're right, we lost the right to call you our son that day, but Nathan, you don't know how we—" "I didn't come here for apologies," Nathan interrupted. "I came to say things that need to be said." Karen and Robert sat on the couch side by side, as if needing each other's support to face the moment. Nathan remained standing, arms crossed, trying to maintain the cold, distant stance he had rehearsed. "You threw me out when I was 13, he began. "Tossed me to the streets like I was a criminal. You never gave me a chance to defend myself, never doubted the accusations against me." "We know," Karen started, but Nathan cut her off. "I'm not done. You didn't just kick me out. When you found out I was living with Grandma Grace, you refused to sign the papers so I could keep studying. You sabotaged my future, out of pure spite." Robert hung his head, shame clear in his posture. "Did you want to teach me a lesson?" Nathan continued, his voice rising. "Well, you did. I learned that family means nothing when things get tough. I learned that even parents can abandon you without looking back. I learned not to trust anyone." "Nathan, please," Karen begged, tears streaming down her face. "No, you'll hear me out," Nathan shouted. "You know what hurt the most? It wasn't being thrown out. It was realizing you never really knew me. After 13 years, did you really believe I'd vandalize someone's shop? Did you honestly think I was that kind of person?" Robert struggled to his feet, trying to move closer to his son. "We were afraid," he said. "The evidence seemed so—" "Evidence?" Nathan laughed bitterly. Evidence of what? Of people who barely knew me saying they saw me running? That was the evidence that mattered more than 13 years of knowing me. You're right, Robert admitted, his voice breaking. We completely failed you. We have no excuse for what we did. You really don't, Nathan agreed. And do you know the result? I spent 10 years of my life unable to trust anyone. I lost relationships, friendships, chances to be happy, all because you taught me that even those who should love me can abandon me. Karen stood up and tried to touch Nathan's arm, but he pulled away. My son, please, she murmured. Stop calling me your son, Nathan exploded. You lost that right 10 years ago. I'm not your son anymore. You're not my parents anymore. We're just strangers who once lived in the same house. Don't say that, Robert begged. We messed up. We messed up badly. But you were and always will be our son. Not a day goes by that we don't think of you, that we don't regret what we did. Regret is easy now, Nathan said. Where was that regret when I needed it? Where was it when I begged you to believe me? We were foolish, cowardly, terrible parents, Karen said between sobs. But we never stopped loving you. Never. Love that abandons isn't love, Nathan replied. It's selfishness. You loved me as long as I was the perfect son you wanted. But at the first sign of trouble, you threw me away. The room fell silent for a few moments. Only Karen's sobs, breaking the heavy air. Nathan looked at his parents, trying to feel the satisfaction he'd imagined he'd feel seeing them suffer. But instead of satisfaction, he only felt deep sadness. I built a life without you, he finally said. I have my home, my job, my money. I don't need you for anything. We know, Robert said. We heard you became a successful man. We were proud, even though we had no right to be proud. Proud? Nathan asked, incredulous. You really don't have that right. Everything I achieved was in spite of you, not because of you. You're right, Karen agreed. But even so, we couldn't stop feeling proud of the man you became, and we couldn't stop regretting not being part of your success. Nathan felt a strange emotion rising in his chest. For years, he'd dreamed of his parents acknowledging his worth, admitting they'd made a mistake. Now that it was happening, he didn't know how to feel. It's too late, he said, but his voice sounded less convincing. We know it is, Robert admitted. We're not asking for forgiveness because we don't deserve it. We're not asking you to come back because we know you won't. We just wanted you to know that not a day goes by without us regretting what we did. And that you'll always be our son, no matter what you say, Karen added. It doesn't matter if you forgive us or not. You'll always be the most important person in our lives. Nathan felt tears threatening to fall, but fought to hold them back. He couldn't show weakness now, not after 10 years of building his emotional armor. I have to go, he said abruptly. Wait, Robert stood up. Will you come back? Whenever you want, the house will always be open to you. I won't come back, Nathan answered, walking toward the door. At least let us know how you're doing sometimes, Karen pleaded. A phone call, a letter, anything. Nathan stopped with his hand on the doorknob. Part of him wanted to say yes, wanted to keep some kind of contact. But the wounded part, the part that had ruled his life for the past 10 years, stopped him. No, he said without turning around. This was the first and last time we'll see each other. He walked out, slamming the door behind him harder than necessary. Nathan got into his car and drove on autopilot to Grace's house. Only, when he parked in front of his grandmother's home, did he realize he was crying. They were tears of anger, pain, and confusion. He had imagined confronting his parents would make him feel better, stronger. Instead, he felt more lost than ever. Grace was waiting in the living room, as if she knew he would need her that night. How did it go? She asked gently. It was hard, Nathan admitted, collapsing onto the couch beside his grandmother. Did they ask for forgiveness? They did. They admitted they were wrong, said they regret it every day. And how do you feel? Nathan stayed silent for a long moment, trying to sort through the conflicting emotions swirling in his chest. Confused, he finally said. I thought I'd feel vindicated, satisfied to see them suffering, but that's not what I felt. What did you feel? Sadness. Sadness for everyone. For them, for me, for everything we lost in these 10 years. Grace nodded in understanding. Anger is easier to carry than sadness, she said. But it's also more destructive. I don't know if I can forgive them, Grandma, Nathan confessed. I don't know if I want to. Forgiveness isn't about them, my child. It's about you. It's about freeing your heart from the weight you've been carrying all these years. What if I forgive them and they hurt me again? What if you don't forgive them and waste the rest of your life with this bitterness? Grace countered. Nathan had no answer for that. He stayed at his grandmother's house late into the night, talking about childhood memories, his parents, the life he'd built alone. It was the deepest conversation he'd had in years. When he finally returned home, Nathan felt emotionally drained. He had reopened wounds he thought had healed, felt emotions he'd tried to bury for a decade. In the days that followed, Nathan couldn't stop thinking about the meeting with his parents. He replayed every word, every expression, every tear. The image of Robert, fragile and Karen aged, wouldn't leave his mind. For the first time in 10 years, Nathan allowed himself to remember the good moments from his childhood. The Sunday mornings when the family had breakfast together in the kitchen. The nights they all watched movies on the couch. The times Robert had taught him to ride a bike, or when Karen had taken care of him when he was sick. Had it all been a lie? Had the love he'd felt for his parents as a child been just an illusion? Or could good people also make terrible mistakes? A week after the meeting, Nathan got an unexpected call. It was Jessica. "Hi, Nathan," she said, her voice hesitant. "Sorry to call out of the blue. I heard you visited your parents." "How did you know?" Nathan asked, surprised. "Hopeville is small. News travels. I'm glad you took that step." "It wasn't a step toward reconciliation," Nathan clarified. "It was just something I needed to do." "I know. But still, I can imagine how hard it must have been for you." There was a pause on the line. Nathan could hear Jessica's breathing on the other end and remembered how safe he'd once felt with her. "Jessica," he began, but didn't know how to continue. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You sound different." "I'm confused," Nathan admitted. "Really confused." "Want to talk? We could grab coffee like we used to." Nathan hesitated. Part of him desperately wanted Jessica's company, someone to share all the turmoil he was feeling. But the other part, the part that had learned to protect itself, feared opening up again. "I don't know if that's a good idea," he said. "It's just coffee between friends," Jessica insisted gently. "No pressure, no expectations, just a conversation." In the end, Nathan agreed. They met at the same coffee shop where they'd had their first date years ago. Jessica looked exactly as he remembered, sweet, patient, with that gentle smile that always put him at ease. "You've lost weight," she observed as soon as they sat down. "It's been a tough week," Nathan admitted. Jessica didn't press him. She just ordered coffee and waited for him to speak in his own time. And, to his own surprise, Nathan found himself telling her everything. The meeting with his parents, the confusion of emotions, the childhood memories resurfacing. "You know the hardest part," he said after sharing the whole story. "Part of me still loves them. After everything, after 10 years of anger and resentment, there's still a part of me that misses them." "And that scares you?" Jessica asked. "Very much. Because it means all this time I've spent trying to protect myself might have been for nothing. If I still love them, then they can still hurt me." "Or it means you're stronger than you think," Jessica suggested. "Loving someone who hurt you is one of the bravest things there is." "I don't feel brave. I feel lost." Jessica reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" Nathan nodded. "Stop trying to control what can or can't hurt you. Life's going to hurt you either way. The question is whether you'll let it stop you from really living, or if you'll accept the pain as part of the price of being alive." "And you?" Nathan asked. "Aren't you afraid of getting hurt again?" Jessica smiled sadly. "Of course. I am. Our breakup hurt me deeply, but that won't stop me from trying again with someone else. Because the fear of being hurt is smaller than the fear of being alone forever." "Are you already trying with someone else?" Nathan asked, feeling a sting of jealousy. "I'm seeing someone, yes," Jessica admitted. "Someone who isn't afraid to open up, to trust, to love without guarantees." Nathan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The idea of Jessica with someone else had always been a theoretical possibility, but knowing it was actually happening hit him harder than he expected. I'm happy for you, he lied. Jessica studied him with gentle but firm eyes. No, you're not, and that's okay. I was jealous too when I heard you dated other people after me. How did you know? Hopeville is small, remember? She smiled. But Nathan, we've both moved on, or at least I have. You're still stuck in the same place you were 3 years ago. What do you mean? You're still protecting yourself, still building walls, still afraid to really live. The only difference is now you have more reasons to justify your fears. Jessica's words struck him like a well-aimed arrow. She was right. Even after meeting his parents, even after all the reflection, he was still in the same emotional place as always. I don't know how to be different, he confessed. Start small, Jessica suggested. Start by forgiving yourself for not being perfect. Then forgive your parents for not being perfect. And then maybe you'll be able to open yourself up to the possibilities life still has to offer. They said goodbye in the coffee shop parking lot. Jessica hugged him briefly. A farewell embrace Nathan knew would be their last. She was moving forward with her life, and he finally understood he had been left behind. That night, Nathan stayed up late, thinking about everything Jessica had said. She was right about one thing. He'd been stuck in the same emotional place for years. Anger had become his comfort zone, a way to avoid the risk of being vulnerable again. But what kind of life was that? A life without risks was also a life without rewards, without true love, without deep connections, without the possibility of real happiness. The next day, Nathan made a decision that surprised even himself. He called his parents. Karen answered the phone, and Nathan could hear the shock in her voice when she realized who was speaking. Nathan, is it really you? It's me, Mom, he said, and for the first time in 10 years, he used the word Mom without bitterness. There was silence on the other end of the line, and Nathan could hear Karen crying. My son, she whispered, you changed your mind about never speaking to us again? I don't know, Nathan answered honestly. I just know I'm tired of carrying so much anger. I'm tired of wasting my life because of what happened in the past. Does that mean you might forgive us someday? Nathan took a deep breath. The word forgiveness was still hard for him, but for the first time it didn't seem impossible. It means I'm willing to try, he said. Karen burst into tears on the other end, and Nathan could hear Robert asking, what was going on? Your father is here, Karen said. He wants to talk to you, can he? Nathan hesitated for a moment, but then agreed. Hello, son. Robert's voice was shaky. Hi, Dad, Nathan said, surprising himself with how naturally the word came out. You actually called. I can't believe it. I can't. Neither can I, Nathan admitted. But maybe it's time to try something different. What does that mean for us? Robert asked cautiously. I don't know yet, Nathan replied. I just know I don't want to live with so much hate in my heart anymore. It's not good for anyone. Can we see each other again? No pressure, no expectations, just to talk? Nathan thought for a moment. The idea still scared him, but it also intrigued him. Maybe it was time to find out if there was still a family beneath all the layers of hurt and resentment. Maybe, he said. Let's take it slow. Really slow. Of course, son. At your pace. We'll be here when you're ready. After hanging up, Nathan felt strangely light, as if a weight he'd carried for years had been lifted, even if only a little. He knew the road to reconciliation would be long and hard. He knew there would be moments of anger, doubt, and the urge to give up. But for the first time in 10 years, he had hope that something new could be built from the wreckage of what had been lost. It wouldn't be the same family as before. That family had died the day he was kicked out at 13, but maybe, just maybe, they could build a new family. One based on forgiveness, understanding, and the acceptance that everyone is imperfect and capable of mistakes. Nathan looked out the window of his house, watching the sun set over Hopeville. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like an endless cycle of loneliness and bitterness. It felt like a blank page, waiting to be written. and he was ready to start a new story. The next day, Nathan woke with a strange feeling in his chest. It was as if a part of him that had been asleep for 10 years was slowly waking up. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it wasn't the constant sadness he'd carried for so long either. It was something like hope. He went to work at the shop but struggled to focus. His thoughts kept drifting back to the call he'd made to his parents the night before. Had he really said Mom and Dad? Had he really told them he was willing to try? Frank, who now only spent a few hours a day at the shop since his health issues, noticed Nathan's distraction. "You're different today," he remarked as Nathan worked on a car engine. "Did something happen?" Nathan stopped what he was doing and looked at the man who had become a father figure to him. "I called my parents last night," he said. Frank set down the tool he was holding, surprised. "Really? How did it go?" "Weird, hard, but not as bad as I thought." "And now? What happens now?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "I said we're willing to try talking again, but I don't know what that means in practice." Frank sat down in an old chair he kept in the corner of the workshop, his joints aching from a lifetime of labor. "Can I give you some advice, son?" Nathan nodded, always valuing the older man's opinion. "Don't rush. 10 years of hurt don't heal in one conversation. But don't give up at the first difficulty either. Relationships are like old engines," he gestured to the cars around them. "Sometimes they need a lot of work to get running again, but when they do, they can last forever. What if we can't fix it? What if we're too broken? Then at least you'll know you tried, and that's more than you have now." Frank's words echoed in Nathan's mind all day. When he closed the shop that night, instead of heading straight home like he always did, he decided to walk through the streets of Hopeville. He strolled past the same streets where he'd played as a child, past the school he'd attended, the park where he used to play ball with friends. With every step, childhood memories returned with surprising clarity. He remembered the day he learned to ride a bike, with Robert running beside him, holding the seat until Nathan finally pedaled on his own. He remembered rainy afternoons when Karen made popcorn and they watched cartoons together on the couch. He remembered family Sundays when they'd go to Grandma Grace's house for lunch and everyone would laugh at her stories. Why had he only held on to the bad memories? Why had he let one terrible moment erase years of good ones? Nathan stopped in front of the park where he used to play and sat on a bench. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A few kids still played on the playground, their laughter echoing in the evening air. Watching them, Nathan remembered what it was like to be happy without fear, to trust people, to love without calculating risks, to live each day as an adventure. When had he lost that? When had he become this man who measured every move, weighed every word, lived afraid of getting hurt? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Grace. "Where are you, my boy? I stopped by your house and you weren't there." "I'm at the town park, Grandma. Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "Everything. Childhood, my parents, the life I've built, trying to understand how I got here." "And have you reached any conclusions?" Nathan was silent for a moment, watching a girl about 5 years old run into her father's arms after sliding down the slide. "I think I built a prison around myself," he finally said. "A prison of fear and resentment. And now I don't know how to get out." "The key is in your hand, Nathan. It always has been." "What do you mean?" "Forgiveness, my boy. Forgiving isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let the past keep controlling your present." "But what if I forgive and they hurt me again?" "What if you don't forgive and waste the rest of your life in bitterness?" Grace asked, echoing the words Jessica had once said. That evening, Nathan had dinner at Grace's house. They talked about many things: work, Frank, the neighbors. But the conversation inevitably turned back to Nathan's parents. "Your mother called me today," Grace said as she served dessert. "What did she say?" "That you called them yesterday. That you said you're willing to try talking again. And what do you think?" "I think it's a brave first step," Grace answered. "But I also know it's going to be hard. You'll have to learn to be a family again, and that takes time." "If we even can," Nathan murmured. "If you really want to try, you'll make it." The love between parents and children is one of the most powerful forces there is. It might be hurt, it might be buried under layers of pain, but it doesn't disappear. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen how your parents suffered. These 10 years, I've seen how you suffered too. If there was no love, there wouldn't be so much pain. That Friday, Nathan gathered his courage and called his parents again. This time, he suggested meeting for coffee on Saturday afternoon. He chose a neutral place, a cafe downtown, far from Hopeville, and the memories that place brought up. Robert and Karen arrived 15 minutes early, clearly nervous. Nathan saw them through the cafe window before entering and was surprised by their anxiety. They looked like two teenagers on a first date. When Nathan walked in, they stood up immediately, unsure whether to greet him with a hug, a handshake, or just a nod. He settled it by pulling out a chair and sitting down, avoiding any physical contact. "Thank you for coming," Karen said, her hands trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us," Robert added. Nathan nodded, still uneasy about the whole situation. There was a strange formality between them, like strangers trying to get to know each other rather than a family trying to reconnect. "How have you been?" Karen asked. "You look well, more mature." "I'm fine," Nathan replied. "I work a lot, keep my life simple." "We heard you have a shop now," Robert said, "that you've become a respected mechanic in the area." "Who told you that?" "People talk," Karen explained. "Hopeville is small. We've heard about your achievements over the years." Nathan felt uneasy knowing his parents had followed his life from a distance all this time. "Why did you never try to talk to me before?" he asked. Robert and Karen exchanged a loaded glance. "We tried several times," Robert admitted, "but you always refused to see us, and after a while we thought maybe it was best to respect your decision." "But we never stopped hoping," Karen added quickly. "We never stopped praying that one day you'd want to talk to us again. And we never stopped regretting what we did," Robert finished. Nathan studied them in silence. They seemed sincere, wrecked with remorse, but part of him still resisted fully believing. 10 years of distrust don't fade easily. "What do you want from me?" he asked bluntly. "Forgiveness," Karen answered immediately. "We don't deserve it, but that's what we want. And a chance to know the man you've become," Robert added. "A chance to be part of your life again if you'll allow it." "What if I can't forgive?" Nathan asked. "What if we find the damage is too deep?" "Then at least we tried," Karen said, tears glistening in her eyes. "And you'll know we truly regret what we did." "We don't expect it to be easy," Robert said. "We don't expect it to be quick. We just hope it's possible." Nathan was silent for a long moment, stirring. The coffee he'd barely touched. There was so much he wanted to say, so many questions he wanted to ask, so much resentment he still carried. "I'll try," he finally said. "But you need to understand that I'm not the 13-year-old boy you kicked out of the house anymore. I've changed. A lot." "We've changed too," Karen said. "What we did to you taught us a lot about the kind of parents we don't want to be." "Too late for me," Nathan murmured, "but not too late for us to try to be better parents moving forward," Robert suggested. "If you'll give us that chance." "How would that work?" Nathan asked. "What would a relationship even look like now?" "Slowly," Karen answered. "One step at a time, maybe meetings like this every now and then, maybe occasional phone calls, maybe with time you could visit the house again." "What if I can't? What if it's too hard?" "Then we'll respect your boundaries," Robert promised. "No pressure, no forcing anything. It'll be at your pace, on your terms." Nathan nodded slowly. It sounded reasonable. It sounded possible. "There's one thing I need to know," he said. "Did you really believe I was guilty? Or was there a part of you that doubted?" Robert lowered his head, clearly wrestling with the answer. "There were moments I doubted," he admitted, "especially at night when I was alone with my thoughts. But I was so angry, so disappointed by the accusations that I pushed those doubts away. And I was so afraid," Karen added. "Afraid? You were really changing, becoming someone I didn't know. It was easier to believe the accusations than to face the possibility that I was losing my son to bad influences." "So you knew you might be wrong, but you kicked me out anyway?" Nathan asked, feeling the old anger rise in his chest. We didn't know consciously, Robert hurried to clarify. But yes, deep down there were doubts we chose to ignore, and that makes it all even worse. Nathan wanted to stand up and walk away. The admission that his parents had doubted, but still, cast him out renewed his fury, but something kept him seated. Why, he asked, why did you ignore the doubts? Because admitting we were wrong would mean facing the fact that we just destroyed our family for nothing, Karen said, crying. It was easier to keep believing we were right than to accept we'd made a terrible mistake. We were cowards, Robert finished, cowards and too proud to admit we might be wrong. The brutal honesty surprised Nathan. He'd expected apologies. Excuses, attempts to downplay what they'd done. Instead, they were taking full responsibility. Thank you for being honest, he finally said. It's the least we can do, Karen replied. They talked for another hour, mostly skimming surface topics, carefully avoiding the most painful subjects. When Nathan finally said he had to leave, they all felt a mix of relief and nervousness. Can we do this again? Robert asked as they prepared to leave. 2 weeks, Nathan answered. Same place, same time. Would you maybe call us during the week? Karen asked timidly. Just so. We know how you're doing. Nathan hesitated, then nodded. Maybe, he said. In the parking lot, they said goodbye with a wave. Nathan watched his parents get into an old car and drive away, realizing he felt not exactly happy, but lighter. Over the next week, Nathan caught himself thinking about his parents several times, not with anger or resentment, but with a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. How had they spent the last decade? What was it like for them, trying to rebuild this? On Thursday, he gathered his courage and called them. Hello? Karen answered on the second ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Hi, Mom. It's Nathan. He could hear her breathing quicken on the other end. Nathan, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you? Fine, I just wanted to call. How are you all doing? We're good. Your father's right here next to me. Do you want to talk to him too? Nathan hesitated for a moment, but then agreed. Son? Robert's voice sounded uncertain. Hi, Dad. How was your week? Normal. Worked a lot. Had dinner with Grandma. Grace yesterday. How about you? We spent the whole week thinking about our meeting last Saturday, Robert admitted, analyzing every word, every gesture, trying to understand how you were feeling. And did you reach any conclusions? That you're still very hurt, Karen said, joining the conversation, but that there's still hope. There is, Nathan confirmed, surprising himself with his own certainty. There's hope. The call lasted only 15 minutes, but it felt natural, without the tension of their in-person meeting. When they hung up, Nathan felt good about his decision to call. The second meeting at the coffee shop was less tense than the first. They managed to talk about more personal matters, share some good memories from the past, even laugh together a few times. Remember that time we tried to set up a tent in the backyard? Karen asked, smiling. And it rained in the middle of the night? I remember, Nathan said, an involuntary smile appearing on his face. We woke up soaked and ran inside laughing. You were about 8, Robert added, and you said it was the best adventure of your life. It was, Nathan admitted. Up until then, it had been. There was a moment of silence as they all remembered that Nathan's happy childhood had been brutally interrupted at 13. I'm sorry we didn't give you more good adventures, Karen said sadly. Maybe there's still time, Nathan suggested, surprising himself. His parents' eyes lit up with cautious hope. You think so? Robert asked. I don't know. But maybe, if we can build something new from the wreckage of what we lost. Over the following months, the coffee shop meetings became regular, every other week, then weekly. Nathan also started calling his parents a few times during the week, brief, calls that helped establish a routine of contact. Slowly, very slowly, they began to know each other again. Nathan talked about his work, about Frank, about some of the relationships he'd had over the years. Robert and Karen shared how they'd spent the last 10 years, the financial struggles they faced when Robert had to retire early, how Nathan's absence had affected everything in their lives. The house became so quiet, Karen said during one of these talks. Your room, we kept everything exactly as you left it, like you might come back any moment. It's still like that? Nathan asked. It is. Your bed, your books, even the clothes you didn't take when you left. Nathan felt a strange emotion imagining his childhood room preserved like a shrine for 10 years. Can I see it? He asked. Someday? Whenever you want, Robert answered immediately. The house was always yours. Always. Will be. But Nathan still wasn't ready to go back to that house. The neutral space of the coffee shop was his limit for now. One day, during one of these meetings, Karen asked a question that changed everything. Nathan, do you think you could ever forgive us? Or is that impossible? Nathan stayed silent for a long time, stirring the sugar in his now cold coffee. I don't know, he answered honestly. Part of me wants to forgive you. But another part is still too hurt, too angry. What if we apologize the right way? Robert asked. The way you need to hear it. What do you mean? Robert took a deep breath and leaned forward, looking directly into his son's eyes. Nathan, I ask for your forgiveness for not believing in you when you needed it most. I ask for forgiveness for choosing to trust strangers instead of trusting my own son. I ask for forgiveness for kicking you out of the house as if you were a criminal when you were just a scared child who needed your parents' protection. Karen held her husband's hand and continued. I ask for your forgiveness for not fighting, for you. For letting fear speak louder than a mother's love, for allowing you to leave when I should have held you in my arms and protected you from the whole world, including your own father. Tears began to well up in Nathan's eyes. I ask for forgiveness for sabotaging your future when we didn't sign the school papers, Robert went on, for choosing wounded pride over our son's well-being. And I ask for forgiveness for all the years we lost, Karen added. For all the birthdays we didn't celebrate, for all your victories we didn't cheer for all the hardships you faced alone when you should have had your parents' support. Nathan was openly crying now, 10 years of pain finally finding an outlet. We forgive you for hating us, Robert said. We forgive you for not wanting to see us all these years. We forgive you for building a life without us. Because we understand we deserved all of it. But if there's even a small chance we can build a new family from the wreckage of the old one, Karen said, we want to try, because we love you. We always have and we always will, even if you can never forgive us. Nathan couldn't stop crying. Every word he'd waited 10 years to hear was being spoken, but more than that, they were being said with sincerity, with true remorse, with love. I want to forgive you, he managed between sobs, but I don't know how. I don't know how to let the hurt go. It doesn't have to be today, Karen said gently. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It can be a long process. We'll wait. What if it takes longer than you can wait? Nathan asked. Then we'll wait longer, Robert replied simply. That night, Nathan called Grace and told her about the conversation. How do you feel? She asked. Relieved, scared, hopeful, all at once. Forgiveness isn't a switch you turn on or off, Grace said. It's a process. Sometimes you wake up feeling like you've forgiven. Sometimes you wake up angry again. But with time, the days of forgiveness start to outnumber the days of anger. What if I forgive them and they let me down again? Then you'll deal with it if it happens. But Nathan, you can't spend your whole life avoiding the possibility of being hurt. That isn't living, it's just surviving. 2 weeks later, Nathan made a decision that surprised even himself. He called his parents and said he wanted to have dinner with them, at home. The silence on the other end of the line was long. Then he heard Karen crying. Are you sure? She asked. No, Nathan admitted, but I want to try. When? Saturday, if that's okay with you. It's okay, Robert said, clearly emotional. It's more than okay. On Saturday night, Nathan parked his car in front of the house where he'd grown up. His hands shook as he walked through the garden to the front door. The same door he'd knocked on 10 years ago to confront his parents. The same door that had closed behind him when he left at 13. Karen opened the door before he even knocked, as if she'd been waiting by the window. Welcome home, she said, trying to steady her voice. Nathan stepped inside and was hit by a wave of memories. The smell was the same. The decor was practically unchanged. It was like stepping back in time. Everything's just the same, he observed. We couldn't change much, Robert admitted. This house became a sort of museum of the memories we shared with you. They dined at the same table where Nathan had eaten thousands of meals as a child. At first, the conversation was hesitant, formal, but gradually the familiarity of the surroundings began to break down the barriers. "Can I see my room?" Nathan asked after dinner. Karen and Robert exchanged a nervous glance. "Of course," Karen said, "but brace yourself. It's exactly as you left it." They climbed the stairs and Nathan felt his heart race with each step. When Karen opened the bedroom door, he was breathless. It truly was like a time capsule. His bed was made with the same sheets he'd used at 13. His books were arranged on the shelf exactly where he'd left them. His clothes still hung in the closet. "My God," he murmured, stepping inside. "We cleaned regularly," Karen explained, "but we never changed a thing. It was our way of keeping you present in the house." Nathan sat on the bed, running his hand over the sheets. So many memories rushed back at once. Nights doing homework at that desk, Sunday mornings sleeping in, conversations with his parents, perched on the edge of the bed. "Why did you keep everything?" he asked. "Because we never lost hope you'd come back," Robert answered. "And because we wanted you to know you always had a place here, no matter what happened." Nathan picked up a book from the shelf, an adventure story he'd read over and over as a child. The pages were yellowed, but the book was in perfect condition. "Can I stay here alone for a while?" he asked. "Of course," Karen said. "We'll be downstairs whenever you're ready." Alone in his childhood room, Nathan let the tears flow freely. They weren't just tears of sadness, but of grief. Grief for the boy he'd been, for the family they'd lost, for the years they could never recover. But there was something else in those tears too, something like relief, as if a part of himself that had been missing for 10 years was finally coming home. When he went downstairs, he found his parents sitting in the living room, clearly anxious. "How do you feel?" Karen asked. "Like I've found a part of me that was lost," Nathan answered honestly. Does that mean you might consider coming home?" Robert asked hesitantly. Nathan shook his head. "I can't move back here," he said. "Too much has changed. I've changed. But maybe I can visit more often." "That would be wonderful," Karen said. "And maybe we can try to be a family again. Different than before, but still a family." The following weeks marked the beginning of a new chapter in Nathan's relationship with his parents. He started visiting them regularly, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to talk. Slowly, they rebuilt an intimacy that had been lost. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, arguments about the past, relapses into old bitterness. But whenever it happened, they all remembered what had been lost before and made an effort to move forward. Nathan also began including his parents in aspects of his current life. He took them to see his home, introduced them to Frank, even invited them to dinner at Grace's house. The meeting between Grace and her children was emotional and difficult. Grace had resented them for casting Nathan out, but she was also happy to see the family coming together again. "You hurt my grandson deeply," she said bluntly to Robert and Karen, "but I see you're trying to make amends. That counts for something." "We know we don't deserve forgiveness," Karen said. "Not Nathan's, not yours, but we're trying to be better people." "People can change," Grace agreed. "But real change is proven through actions, not words." Over time, Robert and Karen's actions truly proved their transformation. They respected Nathan's boundaries, didn't push for more than he was, willing to give, and genuinely made an effort to understand the man he had become. A year after that first meeting at the coffee shop, Nathan did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He organized a birthday party for Robert at his parents' house. "Why do you want to do this?" Grace asked when Nathan told her about the idea. "Because I want to create new, good memories," Nathan replied. "I'm tired of living, only with the bad ones." The party was small, just close family and a few old neighbors, but it was the first celebration the family had held together in over 10 years. During the party, Nathan gave a speech that moved everyone. 10 years. "Ergo, our family broke apart," he said. "And for a long time, I thought we could never be a real family again. But I learned something important. Families aren't perfect. Parents aren't perfect. Children aren't perfect. We all make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. He looked directly at Robert and Karen. You made a mistake that hurt me deeply, and I made the mistake of letting that hurt keep me from living fully for 10 years. But today, in this house where I grew up, surrounded by the people who loved me, I choose to leave the past behind. Tears streamed freely down the faces of everyone present. Dad, Mom, Nathan continued, I forgive you, completely, without reservations. And I ask that you forgive me too for holding on to so much anger in my heart for so long. Robert stood up and hugged his son for the first time in 10 years. Karen joined the embrace, and the three of them stood there, crying and holding each other as the other guests applauded. We love you so much, son, Karen murmured through tears. I love you too, Nathan replied, surprising himself with the absolute truth of those words. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was still work to be done, hard conversations ahead, moments of difficulty to overcome. But it was a fresh start, proof that love can heal even the deepest wounds. In the months that followed, Nathan became a different man. He still worked at the shop, still lived in his own house, but now he had a family again. He had dinner with his parents at least once a week, called them regularly, and slowly opened up to others as well. Frank noticed the change immediately. You seem different, he said one day at the shop. Lighter, happier. I am, Nathan agreed. I made peace with my parents, and in the process, I think I made peace with myself too. And now? What's next? Nathan smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't worn in years. Now I live. Really live this time. 6 months later, Nathan ran into Jessica by chance at the supermarket. They talked briefly, and she remarked on how different he seemed. You look more open, she observed, like a suit of armor's been removed. It has, Nathan confirmed. I've learned that living in fear of being hurt hurts more than actually being hurt. I'm glad you figured that out, Jessica smiled. Everyone deserves to live without fear. And you? Still with that person you mentioned? I am. In fact, we're getting married next month. Nathan felt a pang of something he couldn't immediately identify. Not quite jealousy, but maybe nostalgia for what might have been. I'm happy for you, he said, and he truly meant it. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Jessica replied. And now that you've learned to trust again, I'm sure you'll find someone special. That evening, Nathan had dinner with his parents and told them about his encounter with Jessica. How do you feel? Karen asked. Sad for missing a chance at happiness because of my fears, Nathan admitted, but also hopeful. If I could forgive you and rebuild our family, maybe I can build one of my own too. You will, Robert said with conviction. You're a good man, Nathan. Any woman would be lucky to have you. As long as you don't hide who you truly are, Karen added. The right person will love you exactly as you are, wounds and scars included. 2 years after the reconciliation, Nathan was working in the shop when a young woman came in with a car that needed repairs. She was a teacher at the local school, had just moved to Hopeville, and was looking for a trustworthy mechanic. I'm Amanda, she introduced herself with a warm smile. I heard you're the best mechanic around. I'm Nathan, he replied, returning the smile. And I'm probably the only mechanic around, so the competition isn't too tough. Amanda laughed, and Nathan was surprised by how good the sound of her laughter made him feel. This time, when a woman showed interest, he didn't put up walls. When Amanda suggested getting coffee after the car was fixed, he accepted without hesitation. Over coffee, they talked naturally about their lives. Nathan told her about the shop, about Frank, about his family. When Amanda asked about his parents, he didn't change the subject or get defensive. I have a complicated relationship with them, he said honestly. We went through a really tough time when I was a teenager, and we only recently reconciled. That must have been painful, Amanda said with empathy. It was, but it was also one of the best things I've ever done. I learned that holding on to resentment hurts more than forgiving. Amanda smiled, clearly impressed by his emotional maturity. That's a lesson many people take a lifetime to learn. Their relationship developed naturally and healthily. Nathan allowed himself to be vulnerable, shared his whole story, and opened up about his fears and insecurities. And Amanda, in turn, accepted him completely, emotional scars and all. When Nathan introduced her to his parents 6 months into their relationship, Robert and Karen were charmed by her. "She's perfect for you," Karen told Nathan, while Amanda chatted with Robert in the garden. "She's kind, but strong. Sweet, but not fragile. She accepts me as I am," Nathan said. "She doesn't try to change or fix me, she just loves me." "And do you love her?" Nathan looked at Amanda, who was laughing at some story Robert was telling, and felt his heart warm. "I do," he said. "I really do." A year and a half later, Nathan proposed to Amanda. He did it in his parents' living room, with Robert, Karen, Grace, and Frank there as witnesses. "I want to get married surrounded by the family I've regained and the family I've chosen," he told Amanda as he knelt. "Will you be part of that family?" Amanda said yes through tears, and everyone in the room cried with her. The wedding took place at Hopeville's church, a simple but moving ceremony. Robert walked Nathan down the aisle, a moment neither had thought possible years before. During the vows, Nathan spoke about forgiveness, second chances, and the courage to love despite the fear of being hurt. "Amanda," he said, "you taught me that love is worth the risk, that being vulnerable is worth it, that trust is worth it. I promise never to hide behind walls of fear again, and to share with you all the joys and hardships life brings." 2 years after their wedding, Amanda and Nathan had their first child, a boy they named Jacob. When Nathan held his son in his arms for the first time, he felt an emotion he couldn't describe. "I promise I'll be a better father," he whispered to the baby. "I promise I'll always believe in you, always support you, always love you unconditionally." Robert, who was at the hospital to meet his grandson, overheard his son's words and was moved. "You already are a better father," he said, "because you learned from our mistakes." "And I learned that making mistakes is part of being human," Nathan replied. "What matters is trying to make things right when we do." Jacob grew up in a family full of love, but also full of stories. Nathan made sure to teach his son about the importance of forgiveness, about how families can break, but can also heal. "Grandpa Robert and Grandma Karen made a big mistake when Daddy was little," he explained when Jacob was old enough to understand. "And Daddy was very angry with them for a long time, but in the end we found out that love is stronger than anger." "And now you love each other again?" Jacob would ask. "Now we love each other more than ever," Nathan answered, "because our love went through a very hard test and survived." Grace, who lived to see Jacob turn 5, often said her grandson had become the man she always knew he could be. "You learned life's most important lesson," she told Nathan shortly before passing. "That loving is always a risk, but it's always worth taking." When Grace passed, it was a painful loss for the whole family, but Nathan faced grief differently than he had other losses in his life. Instead of closing himself off, he opened up, even more to the people he loved. "Grandma taught us that life is too short to hold grudges," he said at the funeral. "She taught us that love always wins in the end." Now at 35, Nathan has a life he never imagined possible when he was kicked out of the house at 13. He has a thriving workshop, a wife who loves him, a healthy and smart son, and a close relationship with his parents. Robert and Karen are devoted grandparents, determined to make up for lost time by giving their grandson love and attention. Nathan watches their bond with Jacob and feels a mix of joy and melancholy. Joy at seeing the genuine love between them, and melancholy at remembering he himself lost precious years of that closeness. But he's learned not to live in the past. He's learned that every day is a chance to create new and good memories. One Sunday afternoon, as the whole family gathered in his parents' garden, the same house he'd been kicked out of at 13, Nathan watched Jacob playing with his grandparents and Amanda chatting with Karen about flowers. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked, sitting beside his son on the bench where they used to sit when Nathan was a child. "I'm thinking it was all worth it," Nathan replied. "All the suffering, all the pain, the whole journey. It was worth it because it brought us here." "So you've truly forgiven? You don't hold any resentment?" Nathan thought for a moment, watching his son run through the same garden where he'd played decades earlier. "I don't hold resentment," he finally said, "but I haven't forgotten. The scars are still there. The difference is now they don't control my life. They're just part of my story. A story with a happy ending, Robert observed. A story with a happy new beginning, Nathan corrected. Because the story isn't over. We're still writing it every day. And it was true. Each day brought new chances to choose love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, hope over despair. Nathan had learned that life isn't about avoiding pain, but about finding meaning in it. When Jacob would ask about the old photos where Daddy didn't appear with his grandparents for several years, Nathan always answered with age-appropriate honesty. Sometimes families go through tough times, he'd explain, but true love always finds a way to heal the wounds. Like the boo-boos you get that get better, Jacob would ask, comparing them to the scrapes he got from playing. Exactly like those, Nathan would smile. Sometimes it hurts a lot at first, but with time and care it gets better, and sometimes it even becomes stronger than before. Amanda often told Nathan she admired his ability to forgive and move forward. It wasn't easy, he'd always reply. And it wasn't quick. But I learned that carrying hatred is like carrying a heavy rock. You might get used to the weight, but that doesn't mean it isn't hurting you. And when did you decide to put the rock down? When I realized it was stopping me from embracing the good things life wanted to give me. Nathan's repair shop had become more than a business. It turned into a place where people from the community came not just to fix cars, but to talk, vent, and ask for advice. Nathan had become known in the area as someone who knew how to listen and always had a word of wisdom to offer. Often, people in difficult family situations sought Nathan out to hear his story and ask for guidance. He always said the same thing, that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or accepting bad behavior, but choosing not to let bitterness control your life. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, he'd often say. It doesn't mean the other person deserves it. It means you deserve to be free. During one of these conversations, a 17-year-old named Tyler came to see Nathan. He'd fought with his parents and was thinking about leaving home. "My parents don't understand me," Tyler said. "They want me to be someone I'm not." "And do you think running away will solve the problem?" Nathan asked. "It worked for you, didn't it?" Nathan stopped what he was doing and looked seriously at the young man. "Tyler, I didn't run away, I was kicked out, and it cost me 10 years of my life. 10 years of loneliness, bitterness, and missed opportunities. Do you really want that for yourself? But what if they never accept me for who I am? Then you'll have tried everything before making a drastic decision. You'll know you did your part. But running away without trying to work things out is giving up before you even fight." Nathan convinced Tyler to go home and try talking honestly with his parents. A few weeks later, Tyler returned to the shop to thank him. "You were right," he said. "When we really talked, we realized the problem was miscommunication, not a lack of love." "It almost always is," Nathan smiled. "The people who love us sometimes hurt us because they don't know how to express love in a way we understand. And we sometimes hurt the people we love because we don't know how to express what we feel." Stories like Tyler's became common in Nathan's life. He discovered that his experience, painful as it had been, could help others avoid similar mistakes or find paths to reconciliation. During one of his last conversations with Frank before the old mechanic retired completely, Nathan reflected on how his life had changed. "Do you remember how I was when I started working here?" he asked. "I remember," Frank smiled. "An angry young man, suspicious of everyone, building walls around his heart. And now? Now you're a man who learned that the walls we build to protect ourselves also imprison us. I learned that from you, Nathan said. "You were the first to show me I could trust someone again. I just set the example. You did the hard part. The hard part of what? Choosing to believe again, choosing to love again, choosing to be vulnerable again. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." When Frank finally retired, he officially left the shop to Nathan, along with a letter that read, "To the son I chose, who became the man I always knew you could be. May you use this place to keep healing hearts just as you healed your own." Nathan framed the letter and hung it on the shop wall, next to a photo of the whole family. Him, Amanda, Jacob, Robert, Karen, and Grace, taken just before Grandma passed. "Why did you put the picture there?" Jacob asked one day when he visited the shop. "To remember that family is the most important thing in the world," Nathan replied, "and that it's worth fighting for even when it seems impossible. Even when they do bad things, especially when they do bad things, because it's easy to love when everything's fine. Real love is what survives when things get hard." Jacob, now 8, had inherited his father's sensitivity and often asked deep questions about life and relationships. "Dad, do you think, if your parents hadn't kicked you out, you'd be a different person today?" Nathan thought for a long time before answering. "Probably," he admitted. "Maybe I'd be less empathetic, less understanding of people who make mistakes. Maybe I wouldn't value family, forgiveness, or second chances as much." "So was it good that it happened?" "No, son, it wasn't good. It was painful and unnecessary. But I learned to turn that pain into wisdom. I learned to use my experience to help others." Like a scar turning into a pretty tattoo. Nathan smiled at his son's creative comparison. Exactly like that. The scar doesn't disappear, but you can turn it into something meaningful. On a special afternoon when Jacob turned 9, Nathan took him to see the house where he'd grown up. Not to visit his grandparents, but specifically to show his son where it all began and where it all healed. They sat on the sidewalk, the same spot where Nathan had cried at 13 after being thrown out. "This is where everything changed in my life," Nathan said. "Where I learned that sometimes the people we love most can hurt us the most, too." "Were you scared?" Jacob asked. "Terrified. Scared of being alone, scared of having nowhere to go, scared my parents didn't love me anymore. But they did, right? They did. It just took us all a long time to learn how to show that love after what happened. And now? Now we know love is stronger than any mistake. That real family never gives up even when it seems impossible to keep going." They sat there for an hour, father and son, looking at the house where generations of their family had grown up, where hurt had taken root and forgiveness had bloomed. "You want to know the best part of this whole story?" Nathan asked. "What?" "Now you have grandparents who love you more than anything in the world, and they know how to be better grandparents because they learned from the mistakes they made with me. And will you be a better dad too because you learned from their mistakes?" "I'll try," Nathan promised. "But if I make mistakes, and I will because all parents do, I hope you'll give me the chance to fix them, like I gave your grandparents." "I will," Jacob promised, "because you taught me forgiving is important." That night at Jacob's birthday dinner at his grandparents' house, Robert made a special toast. "Today I want to give thanks not just for another year of my grandson's life," he said, raising his glass, "but for all the years we got back when our family reconciled. Jacob, you were born into a family that learned love can heal any wound, and that second chances exist for those willing to earn them," Karen added, "and that life always offers new beginnings for those brave enough to start over," Amanda finished. Nathan looked around the table, seeing his family gathered, and felt deep gratitude for the journey that had brought him there. "Jacob," he said, "one day you'll face your own challenges, your own struggles, maybe even your own heartaches. When that day comes, remember this night. Remember you come from a family that believes in forgiveness, that fights for love, and never gives up on each other." "I'll remember, Dad," Jacob promised. And so on a spring afternoon in Hopeville, 22 years after being kicked out of home at 13, Nathan finally understood his story hadn't been about loss, but about reunion. Not about a family broken, but about a family rebuilt on stronger foundations. It had been about a boy who learned the hardest way that even parents can fail, but who grew into a man who understood that failing doesn't mean stopping. And when Jacob grew up and had children of his own, they too would know they came from a line of people who believed in the transformative power of forgiveness, the renewing strength of love, and the ever-present possibility of new beginnings. Nathan's story had become all of theirs, a story of how love can survive life's worst, and how a real family chooses to stay together not just in easy times, but especially in impossible ones. And that afternoon, sitting in the garden of the house where he'd grown up, watching his son play with the same toys he'd used decades before, Nathan finally understood he'd arrived where he always should have been, home, surrounded by love with a heart open to all the possibilities the future still held. The end. What a touching story about forgiveness and family, isn't it? Nathan's journey teaches us that even the deepest wounds can heal with love and patience. Let us know in the comments, do you think Nathan made the right choice forgiving his parents? Share your thoughts on family forgiveness with us. Thank you so much for joining us till the end of this moving story. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe for more heartwarming tales.